On the day of my daughter's wedding, I found my photo taped to the glass of the security booth, with a thick red line drawn diagonally across my face. The caption written in bold black marker read, "Do not admit." I did not scream. I did not beg the guard to let me through. I simply put my truck in reverse and drove away in silence. 4 hours later, my daughter Brittany realized her fairy tale wedding had a very strict expiration date, and she had just triggered the kill switch. Before I tell you how I dismantled a $150,000 event from my home office, let me know in the comments if you have ever been cut out of a life you paid for. Like and subscribe if you believe respect is a two-way street. My name is Douglas Carter. Most people call me Doug. I am 68 years old, and for 40 years I worked as a structural engineer and independent contractor. I know concrete. I know steel. I know that if the foundation is rotten, the house will fall no matter how much fresh paint you slap on the walls. I just never realized the house I built with my own blood and sweat contained a rot so deep it would eventually lock me out of the front gate. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early October, the kind of day that feels crisp and expensive in upstate New York. The sky was a piercing, cloudless blue, the leaves were turning that burning shade of orange, and I was driving my 2010 Ford F-150 toward the Golden Oak Resort. It is the most exclusive venue in the county, a place where senators play golf and old money families host galas to congratulate themselves on being rich. I knew the place well. I had poured the foundation for the main clubhouse back in '92. I had supervised the reinforcement of the south wing 10 years later. But today, I was not there to inspect a load-bearing wall. I was there to walk my only daughter down the aisle. I was wearing my best suit. It was a navy blue Brooks Brothers No. 1, had bought 5 years ago for a funeral. It was clean-pressed and fit well enough, though I felt stiff in the shoulders. In the passenger seat sat a small gift box containing a check for $10,000. That was supposed to be the nest egg for Brittany and her new husband Tyler. That was on top of the checks I had already written. The deposit for the venue, the catering, the flowers that cost more than my first car. I had paid for it all through my holding company, disguised as a gift from Tyler's parents, because Brittany said it was important for the optics. She wanted people to think she was marrying into a dynasty. I just wanted her to be happy. As I pulled up to the main gate, the gravel crunching beneath my tires, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Not because I was losing a daughter, but because I felt like an imposter. My truck, reliable as it was, had a dent in the rear bumper from a job site accident, and a layer of dust that never really washed off. Surrounded by the manicured hedges and the wrought iron gates of the Golden Oak, my Ford looked like a stray dog at a poodle show. I rolled down the window as I approached the security checkpoint. Usually the resort staff knew me. Old Mike at the gate would wave me through and ask about the Giants game. But today, Mike was gone. In his place stood a man I did not recognize. He was built like a refrigerator, wearing a black tactical suit that looked ridiculous for a wedding, and an earpiece that made him look like he was guarding the president. This was private security. Brittany had mentioned Tyler's family wanted extra privacy. I realized now they did not want privacy. They wanted exclusion. Name, the guard grunted. He did not look at me. He was looking at a clipboard, his sunglasses reflecting the hood of my truck. "Douglas Carter," I said, smiling. "I am the father of the bride." The guard stopped moving. He slowly lowered the clipboard and looked at me. Then he looked at something inside his booth. He did not check a list. He did not radio up to the main house. He just stared at me with a look of absolute boredom mixed with a hint of pity. "Turn around," he said. I frowned, thinking I had misheard him over the hum of my engine. "Excuse me. I said I am the father of the bride. Brittany Carter. The wedding starts in 45 minutes. I am a little early for photos." "You are not on the list, sir," the guard said, his voice flat. "And I have strict instructions. Private event. No unlisted vehicles, no unlisted guests, especially not you." I turned off the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. I could hear the wind rustling the expensive ornamental trees lining the driveway. There must be a mistake, I said, reaching for my phone. Let me call my daughter. Or Tyler. Or you can call the wedding planner Mrs. Sterling. She knows me. I signed the checks. The guard sighed, the sound of a man who was already tired of his shift. He stepped out of the booth. He was big, towering over the window of my truck. He walked around to the front of the glass booth and tapped a knuckle against the pane. Look, he said. I squinted. Taped to the inside of the glass facing outward was a piece of paper. It was a printout. A grainy, low-resolution photo of me taken from my Facebook profile picture. It was a photo of me on a fishing trip holding a bass, wearing my lucky flannel shirt and a baseball cap. But someone had taken a thick red marker and drawn a slash through my face. Below it, in bold capitalized letters, were the words, "Do not admit. Douglas Carter, persona non grata." My heart did not pound. My hands did not shake. In my line of work, when you see a catastrophic structural failure, you do not panic. You assess. You look at the cracks. You calculate the collapse radius. I stared at that picture. It was recent. Brittany had liked that photo on Facebook 2 weeks ago. Now it was a wanted poster at her wedding. Why, I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm, detached. The guard shrugged. He adjusted his earpiece. The groom's mother gave me the sheet, said to keep the riffraff out, said something about the aesthetic. She said they didn't want any blue-collar interruptions ruining the vibe. Her words, not mine, pal. Now turn this rust bucket around before I call the cops. You are blocking the entrance for the VIPs. I looked past him. A sleek black Mercedes was approaching the gate behind me. I could see the driver looking impatient. Blue-collar interruptions. The phrase hung in the air. I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel. They were calloused. There was a faint scar on my thumb from a table saw accident in '89. These hands had signed the check for the $30,000 floral arrangement that was currently sitting in the ballroom. These hands had signed the check for the vintage Rolls-Royce that Tyler was going to drive Brittany away in. These hands had paid for the college degree Brittany never used. I looked at the guard. I looked at the gate. I looked at the beautiful winding road that led up to the hotel where my daughter was preparing to marry a man who had never worked a day in his life. I understood then. This was not a mistake. This was a strategy. They wanted my money, but they did not want the man who earned it. I was the wallet, not the father. I was the infrastructure meant to be buried underground, invisible, supporting the beautiful structure above. I did not argue. I did not yell that I paid for the asphalt he was standing on. I did not tell him that without my insurance policy, this entire event was illegal. I simply nodded. Understood, I said. I started the engine. I shifted into reverse. I backed up carefully, maneuvering around the Mercedes. The driver of the luxury car honked at me, a sharp, aggressive blast. I did not look at him. I turned the truck around and drove away from the Golden Oak. I watched the gate disappear in my rearview mirror. I watched the golden leaves blur into a stream of color. The drive home was 45 minutes. For the first 10 minutes, I drove in absolute silence. I did not turn on the radio. I needed to hear the sound of the tires on the pavement. I needed to verify that the world was still turning, that physics still applied, because logically, my world should have ended back at that gate. My phone mounted on the dashboard lit up. I tapped the screen. It was a call to Brittany. It rang once, twice. Then it went to voicemail. Hi, you have reached Brittany. I am currently getting ready for the best day of my life, so I can't come to the phone. Leave a message, or better yet, see you at the altar. I hung up. I tried Tyler. Straight to voicemail. I tried Cynthia, Tyler's mother. The woman who had called me pal through her security guard. She picked up on the second ring. I could hear laughter in the background. Clinking glasses. "Who is this?" she snapped. "It is Doug," I said. "Oh," her voice dropped an octave. "Listen, Doug. We discussed this. Brittany thinks it is better this way. You know how emotional you get. You would just cry and make a scene and embarrass everyone. We are doing you a favor. Besides, Tyler's father is going to walk her down the aisle. It looks better for the photos. He is wearing a tuxedo. You don't even own a tuxedo, do you?" I did not answer. "Just go home, Doug," she said, her voice dripping with that fake high society sweetness that barely covered the venom. "We will send you some pictures. And thanks for the flowers. They are divine." She hung up. I stared at the road ahead. The white lines flashed by in a hypnotic rhythm, emotional. She said I would get emotional. I felt my pulse. It was steady, 60 beats per minute. I was not emotional. I was analyzing the data. Data point 1. My daughter had replaced me with her father-in-law for the photos. Data point 2. They believed I was too poor, too rough, too working class to be seen, but my money was clean enough to spend. Data point 3. They thought I was powerless because I was quiet. I pulled into a gas station about 5 miles from my house. It was an old place, grimy with flickering fluorescent lights. I parked the truck and sat there for a moment. I looked at the suit I was wearing. It felt like a costume. I took off the jacket and threw it into the back seat. I loosened my tie. I unbuttoned the top button of my shirt. I walked into the store. The bell chimed. The clerk, a young kid with headphones around his neck, nodded at me. I walked to the coffee counter. I poured a cup of black coffee. It was burnt, sitting on the burner too long. I didn't care. I needed the bitterness. I needed something real. I stood by the window, sipping the coffee, watching the cars go by on the highway. A family in a minivan pulled up. A dad hopped out to pump gas, while 2 kids in the back seat argued over a tablet. He looked tired. He looked worn out. But when he got back in the car, he handed them snacks, and they smiled. I realized I had been that dad. I had worked 18-hour days on dangerous sites, suspended on steel beams 40 stories up, breathing in dust and fumes, just so Brittany could have piano lessons, so she could go to the private school, so she could have the braces and the summer camps and the car when she turned 16. I had built a foundation for her so strong that she thought she could fly, but she forgot that gravity exists. I took another sip of coffee. I looked at my watch. It was 2:30 p.m. The ceremony was scheduled to start at 3. The reception would start at 4. The dinner service, featuring the lobster tail and filet mignon I had approved 3 months ago, would begin at 5:30. The timeline was clear. The critical path was established. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I did not call Brittany again. I did not call Cynthia. I opened my contacts list and scrolled down. I was not looking for family. I was looking for vendors. In the construction business, you survive on your reputation and your relationships. If you pay on time, if you treat your subcontractors with respect, they will walk through fire for you. If you screw them over, they will bury you in paperwork and delays. I had been in this town for 40 years. I knew everyone. I found the number for Mike, the owner of Flashpoint Generators and Lighting. He was providing the power for the outdoor tent, the heating system, and the elaborate lighting rig that Brittany had demanded. I found the number for Sarah, the head of Gourmet Catering. She and I went way back. I had renovated her kitchen in 2005. I found the number for the Golden Oak Management Office. Not the front desk. The owner's direct line. I finished my coffee. I threw the cup in the trash. The satisfying thud of the cup hitting the bottom of the bin felt like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. I walked back to my truck. I climbed in. I did not turn the key yet. I sat there in the quiet of the cab and I looked at the dashboard clock. 2:45. They had 15 minutes. 15 minutes of ignorance. 15 minutes to enjoy the illusion that they were the kings and queens of the world, and I was just the peasant they had locked outside the gate. I started the engine. The rumble of the V8 engine felt different this time. It didn't sound like a work truck anymore. It sounded like a tank. I drove the final 5 miles to my house. It was a nice house, a ranch style built on 4 acres of land. I had built it myself, brick by brick. It was paid off. No mortgage, no debt. Unlike the Montgomery family, who I knew for a fact were leveraged up to their eyeballs living on credit and appearances. I pulled into the driveway. The house was empty. My wife had passed away 5 years ago. God rest her soul. She would have burned that wedding to the ground with her bare hands if she were here today. But she wasn't here. It was just me. I walked inside. The air was still. I went straight to my office. It was a room Brittany hated. She called it the dust room because it was always filled with blueprints and samples. I sat down at my desk. I unlocked the bottom drawer. I took out a thick file folder labeled Brittany's Wedding. I opened it. Inside were the contracts, every single one of them. The venue rental, the catering agreement, the lighting, the floral design, the band. And at the bottom of every single page in black ink was one signature. Douglas Carter. Not Tyler Montgomery. Not Cynthia Montgomery. Me. I turned on my computer. The screen glowed, illuminating the dark room. I logged into my bank account. I logged into the event management portal. I picked up my phone. I dialed the first number. It was time to make a structural adjustment. It was time to remove the load-bearing walls and see if the castle in the sky could float on its own. I took a deep breath, and I pressed call. The silence in my house was different from the silence in my truck. In the truck, it was the silence of shock. Here, within the 4 walls of the home I built with my own hands 30 years ago, it was the silence of calculation. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors I had installed myself. I passed the living room where Brittany learned to walk. I passed the kitchen where she used to sit on the counter while I made pancakes on Sunday mornings. Every corner of this house held a memory of her, but today those memories felt like ghosts haunting a graveyard. I reached the end of the hall and opened the door to my office. Brittany always hated this room. She called it the dungeon. She said it smelled like old paper and sawdust. To me, it smelled like work. It smelled like integrity. This was not a room for decoration. It was a room for execution. One wall was lined with filing cabinets containing 40 years of blueprints and contracts. The other wall was dominated by a large drafting table now covered in dust and a heavy oak desk that had belonged to my father. I sat down in my leather chair. The leather creaked, a familiar sound that usually brought me comfort. Today it sounded like a judge settling into his bench. I did not turn on the main light. The afternoon sun was slicing through the blinds, casting long prison bar shadows across the desk. I did not need bright lights to see what I had to do. I knew exactly where everything was. I swiveled the chair around to face the large steel safe bolted to the floor in the corner. It was a commercial-grade safe, the kind used in banks. I had bought it when I started handling large cash payrolls for my construction crews back in the 90s. I leaned forward and began to spin the dial. Left to 32, right to 14, left to 8. The tumblers clicked into place with a satisfying mechanical precision. It was the only thing today that had worked exactly as it was supposed to. I pulled the heavy steel handle down and swung the door open. Inside, it wasn't stacks of gold bars or diamonds. It was something far more valuable in this moment. It was information. It was leverage. I reached in and pulled out a thick, expandable file folder. It was navy blue, labeled simply Project B. This was the file for Brittany's wedding. I placed it on the desk. It landed with a heavy thud, the sound of a judge's gavel. I opened it. The first document on top was the master budget spreadsheet. I ran my finger down the columns. I didn't need a calculator. The numbers were burned into my retinas. I had reviewed them every night for the past year. Venue rental for the Golden Oak Resort. $45,000. I remembered writing that check. Brittany had cried tears of joy. She hugged me and said I was the best dad in the world. She said the venue was perfect because it had a view of the mountains. Now I realized she didn't care about the view. She cared about the address. She cared that the Golden Oak was where the rich people got married, and she wanted to be one of them. I turned the page. Catering service by Gourmet Creations. $38,000. That included the lobster bisque, the filet mignon, and the open bar with top-shelf liquor. I remembered the tasting session. Tyler, my future son-in-law, had complained that the filet was a little dry. I had apologized to the chef and paid extra for the prime cut. Tyler had smirked and said, "Good call, Doug." He called me Doug. Never Mr. Carter. Never Dad. Just Doug, like I was his employee. I flipped past the floral arrangements, $20,000 for white roses and imported orchids. I flipped past the band, $12,000 for a 10-piece ensemble from the city. I flipped past the custom lighting, the designer linens, the calligraphy for the invitations. The grand total at the bottom of the page stared back at me. $152,480. That was the price of my exclusion. I had paid over $150,000 to be banned from the premises. I had paid for the food they were eating right now. I had paid for the champagne they were using to toast to their happiness. I had paid for the very chair Cynthia Montgomery was sitting on while she mocked me. But that was not the only file in the safe. I reached back into the steel box. My hand brushed against a colder, thinner folder. This one was red. I pulled it out. This was a file nobody knew about. Not Brittany, not Tyler, and certainly not his arrogant parents, Richard and Cynthia Montgomery. I placed the red folder next to the blue one. The contrast was striking. The blue folder was the fantasy. The red folder was the reality. 6 months ago, when Tyler first proposed, I did what any responsible father and business owner would do. I ran a background check. Not because I was paranoid, but because in my line of work, you don't sign a contract without knowing who you are dealing with. Tyler and his family talked a big game. They drove leased BMWs. They wore Rolex watches. They belonged to the country club. They acted like they owned half the state. But when the report came back, I sat in this very chair and laughed until my sides hurt. I opened the red folder. The first document was a credit report for Richard and Cynthia Montgomery. Their credit score was below 500. They were drowning. I picked up a document titled Notice of Default. 3 years ago, the Montgomerys had stopped paying the mortgage on their McMansion in the suburbs. The bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings twice. Both times they had managed to stall with emergency loans, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. I turned the page to the car loans. Both of their luxury cars were 3 months behind on payments. They were driving repossession targets. But the most damning document was the one at the bottom. It was a promissory note assignment. 4 months ago, the private equity firm holding the Montgomerys' distressed mortgage debt had put it up for sale in a bundle of bad assets. They wanted to liquidate it. They considered it toxic waste. They were selling the debt for 60 cents on the dollar. I saw the opportunity. I didn't do it to hurt them. God help me, at the time I did it to save them. I knew that if they lost their house right before the wedding, it would destroy Brittany. She would be humiliated. So using a shell company I use for real estate acquisitions named DC Holdings, LLC, I bought the debt. I bought their mortgage. I bought their overdue business loans. I effectively bought the Montgomery family. I held the document in my hand. It was a simple piece of paper, but it carried the weight of a guillotine blade. Technically, I was their landlord. I was their creditor. I was the bank. For 4 months, I had sat on this information. I never said a word. I let them strut around bragging about their investments and their heritage. I let Cynthia make snide comments about my truck. I let Richard talk down to me about the economy, lecturing me on fiscal responsibility while he was secretly insolvent. I took it all. I absorbed their insults like a sponge because I thought we were going to be family. I thought that on the wedding day I would give this folder to Brittany as a gift. I was going to forgive the debt. I was going to hand them a fresh start. I looked at the picture of me on the security booth in my mind. The red line across my face. They didn't want a fresh start. They wanted a scapegoat. They wanted my money, but they despised the source of it. They looked at my calloused hands and saw dirt, not dignity. I reached for a pen. It was a heavy silver fountain pen that I used for signing major contracts. I uncapped it. The nib glinted in the sunlight. I pulled a fresh sheet of legal pad paper toward me. I wasn't writing a speech. I was writing a to-do list. Item 1. Call Mitchell Ross, my attorney. Instruct him to execute the acceleration clause on the Montgomery mortgage. The clause stated that if the borrower missed 3 consecutive payments, the lender could demand the full balance immediately. They had missed 4. Item 2. Contact the repossession agency regarding the vehicles. I didn't own the car notes personally, but I knew the banker who did. A simple phone call from me, a tip-off about the location of the vehicles, would speed up the process. Item 3. The wedding. I looked back at the blue folder. The contract for the venue had a very specific clause on page 12, section 4, paragraph B. It was titled the Good Conduct and Authorized Personnel Clause. It stated that the primary signer of the contract, meaning me, had to be present on the property for the duration of the event to authorize any overtime charges or liability issues. It also stated that if the primary signer was barred from entry by any party associated with the event, the contract was null and void, and the event could be terminated immediately for breach of safety protocols. I knew this clause because I wrote it. I always added it to events I sponsored. It was my way of ensuring I never got stuck with a bill I didn't approve. I never thought I would have to use it against my own daughter. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. $150,000. That was a lot of money to set on fire. But dignity was priceless. I thought about Brittany's message again. Don't make a scene. Just go home. I am home, sweetheart, I whispered to the empty room. And now I am going to get to work. I dialed the number for Mitchell first. He answered on the second ring. Doug, he asked. You sound serious. Everything okay with the wedding? No, Mitch? I said, my voice steady and cold. The wedding is over for me. Now I need you to open the Montgomery file. Which one, he asked. The purchase agreement, no, I said. The enforcement file. I want you to file the foreclosure papers today. Electronic filing. I want the notice posted on their door by tomorrow morning. And Mitch, send a courier to the Golden Oak Resort. Address it to Mrs. Cynthia Montgomery. Serve her the papers during the reception. There was a long silence on the other end. Then I heard the sound of Mitchell typing furiously on his keyboard. You are a cold son of a bitch, Doug Mitchell said, but I could hear the smile in his voice. I will have it done in an hour. I hung up. I looked at the clock. 2:55. The ceremony was about to start. The orchestra would be playing Canon in D. Brittany would be walking down the aisle, holding on to the arm of a man who was technically bankrupt, walking toward a future built on lies. I wasn't done yet. I picked up the phone again. This time I dialed the number for the venue manager. It was time to turn off the lights. My computer screen hummed a low and steady sound that usually signaled the start of a workday. But today, the white glow of the monitor felt harsh, like a spotlight in an interrogation room. I had the contracts on my desk, the physical proof of my financial commitment, but I knew that in the digital age, the real truth is often hidden in the metadata. It is hidden in the emails sent at 2 in the morning, in the casual replies typed out on smartphones, in the digital footprints people leave behind when they think no one is watching. I opened the event management portal. It was a shared system I had set up for the wedding. As the primary financier, I had administrator access, a fact that Brittany and her mother seemed to have conveniently forgotten. They treated me like an ATM, unaware that the ATM also had a surveillance camera. I clicked on the Communications tab. This folder contained every message exchanged between the vendors, the planner, and the bride. There were hundreds of emails, discussions about napkin colors that lasted for weeks, arguments about the playlist, demands for vegan options for guests who I knew for a fact ate steak every weekend. It was a digital monument to excess and vanity. But I wasn't interested in the napkin colors. I was looking for something specific. I was looking for the conversation that happened after the security team was hired. I filtered the inbox by date. Today. Yesterday. 2 days ago. And there it was. A thread with the subject line Security Protocol and Guest List Finalization. It was marked with a high-priority red flag. My hand hovered over the mouse. My finger trembled slightly, not from age, but from the adrenaline of a man about to confirm his worst suspicions. I clicked open. The email chain started 3 days ago. It began with a message from Mrs. Sterling, the head wedding planner. I had known Mrs. Sterling for years. She was a professional, a woman who ran events with the precision of a military operation. I respected her, and reading her email, I realized she had tried to save me. The email from Mrs. Sterling read, "Dear Brittany, I have received the updated guest list from your future mother-in-law, Mrs. Montgomery. I noticed that your father, Mr. Douglas Carter, has been removed from the list and placed on the Do Not Admit registry. I must clarify a critical point. Mr. Carter is the primary signatory on all vendor contracts, including the venue liability insurance. His presence is legally required to authorize any on-site contingencies. If he is barred from the premises, we are operating in a gray area regarding our insurance coverage. Please confirm if you want to proceed with this exclusion, and if so, we need to transfer the contract responsibilities to another party immediately." I leaned back in my chair. Mrs. Sterling was a good woman. She had waved the red flag. She had practically screamed that there was a cliff ahead. She gave them a chance to fix it. She gave them a chance to transfer the contracts, to put the debt in their own names. If they had done that, if Tyler or his father had signed their names on the dotted line 3 days ago, I would be powerless right now. I would just be a sad old man sitting at home. But arrogance is a blinding light. It hides the cliff edge until you are already falling. I scrolled down to read Brittany's reply. It was sent from her iPhone 20 minutes later. I could almost see her tapping it out with her manicured thumbs, probably while getting a facial or drinking a mimosa with her bridesmaids. Brittany wrote, "Oh my God, Mrs. Sterling, stop worrying so much. You are such a buzzkill. Listen to me clearly. My father is just the signer. That is his only role. He writes the checks, but he has zero say in how the day goes. He is basically just a wallet with legs. Tyler's family is handling the real management. Do not change the contracts. It is too much paperwork, and Tyler is busy. Just keep my dad's name on the paper, but keep him out of the party. He won't sue his own daughter. He is too soft. Just make it happen. I don't want to see his face." I read the line again. He is just the signer. He won't sue his own daughter. He is too soft. The words did not hurt. Pain implies a reaction, a feeling of loss. This went beyond pain. This was clarity. Absolute freezing clarity. In my line of work, a signature is not just ink on paper. It is a bond. When I sign off on a bridge blueprint, I am betting my life and my reputation that the bridge will hold. When I sign a payroll check, I am promising my workers that their families will eat. A signature is the heaviest thing a man can carry. And my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders at the zoo, the girl I had taught to drive in the parking lot of the high school, thought my signature was nothing more than a rubber stamp. She thought I was soft. She confused my silence for weakness. She confused my generosity for stupidity. She was wrong. I looked at the timestamp. This email was the smoking gun. It was the confession. By admitting that she was knowingly keeping the contract holder off the premises while refusing to transfer the liability, she had committed what lawyers call bad faith. She was using my legal protection while denying my legal rights. I wasn't just a father who had been snubbed. I was a business partner who had been defrauded. I hit the print button. The laser printer in the corner whirred to life. It spat out the email chain on crisp white paper. I picked it up. The paper was still warm. I folded the document carefully and placed it on top of the blue folder. This was the key. This was the detonator. I remembered when Brittany was 12 years old. She had broken a neighbor's window playing baseball. She had come to me crying, terrified. I had hugged her. I had told her that mistakes happen, but we have to own up to them. I took her to the neighbor's house. I made her apologize. I paid for the window, but I made her do chores for a month to work it off. I thought I was teaching her accountability. Somewhere along the way between the private schools and the fancy college and meeting Tyler Montgomery, she had unlearned that lesson. She had learned that if you cry loud enough, or if you act important enough, someone else will pay for the window. Well, Brittany, I thought, staring at her name on the paper. Today nobody is paying for the window. Today the glass shatters and you are standing barefoot in the shards. I looked at the screen again. Mrs. Sterling had sent one final reply, a short, terse message. Understood, Brittany. Proceeding as directed. However, I will keep this email on file for liability purposes. Mrs. Sterling knew. She knew this was a disaster waiting to happen, and she had covered her own back. She was smart. I closed the email tab. I didn't need to see anymore. I didn't need to read the messages where she mocked my suit, or the messages where she laughed about how cheap the nursing home would be when they eventually put me there. I had enough. I picked up my phone. The screen was dark. I unlocked it. The plan in my head shifted. It wasn't just about cutting the power or stopping the food anymore. That was petty. That was revenge. This was about liability. This was about protecting myself. If a fire started at that wedding, if a fight broke out, if someone got food poisoning, I would be the one sued. I would be the one losing my retirement savings because my name was on the insurance. I couldn't let that happen. I had to terminate my exposure. And the only way to do that was to terminate the event. I wasn't the villain of this story. I was the safety inspector shutting down a hazardous site. I dialed the number for Mitchell Ross, my attorney. I pictured him in his office downtown. Mitch was a shark in a suit, but he was my shark. We had played poker every Friday night for 20 years. He knew about the wedding. He knew how much I had spent. He had warned me about the Montgomerys, but I hadn't listened. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Carter Mitch's voice boomed. I assume you are calling me from the open bar. How is the champagne? I am at home, Mitch, I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the tremor that had been there an hour ago. Home, Mitch asked, his tone sharpening. Why aren't you walking Brittany down the aisle? It is 3:00. They stopped me at the gate, Mitch. They have a photo of me with a red line through it. Persona non grata. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. Then I heard the sound of a chair being pushed back. Say that again, Doug. They banned me, I repeated. But they kept my contracts. They kept my insurance. They kept my money. And I have an email from Brittany confirming that she views me as, quote, just a wallet with legs, unquote. She refused to transfer the liability. I heard Mitch exhale a low whistle of disbelief. That is fraud, Doug. That is theft of services. That is, Jesus, that is your daughter. She made her choice, Mitch. Now I am making mine. I want you to execute the nuclear option. I want you to draft a cease and desist for the use of my intellectual property and financial assets. And I want you to prepare the foreclosure notice on the Montgomery house. I am already opening the file, Mitch said, the click of his keyboard rapid and aggressive. What about the vendors? I am handling them now, I said. I am calling in every favor. I am pulling the plug. Do it, Mitch said. And Doug, yeah, bury them. I hung up. I looked at the list of numbers on my notepad. The first name was Mike from the generator company. Mike, who had borrowed $5,000 from me 10 years ago to start his business. Mike, who was a man of honor. I dialed his number. It was time to bring the darkness. I placed the phone on the desk and put it on speaker. I needed my hands free. I needed to be able to pull files and reference clauses as I spoke. I was not calling a friend to cry on his shoulder. I was calling a weapon to point it at a target. Mitchell Ross was the best contract lawyer in the state, and for 30 years he had been the shark swimming in the moat around my business empire. He was the reason I never lost a lawsuit. He was the reason my subcontractors always got paid on time and why my clients never stiffed me on a bill. The phone rang with a low rhythmic purr. I stared at the wood grain of my desk, my mind clearing of all the emotional debris that had clouded it for the last 4 hours. When you are standing in the wreckage of a collapsed building, you do not weep for the broken glass. You call in the bulldozers to clear the site. Mitchell answered on the third ring. There was no casual greeting. No hello, how are you? Mitchell had caller ID, and he knew that when Douglas Carter called on a Saturday afternoon, it was never for small talk. Talk to me, Doug, Mitchell said. His voice was gravelly, the voice of a man who smoked too many cigars and won too many arguments. I need you to open a new case file, Mitch, I said, my voice flat and controlled. The defendant is the wedding of Brittany Carter and Tyler Montgomery. I heard the sound of a heavy leather chair shifting on the other end. I could imagine Mitchell sitting up straighter in his high-rise office downtown. He had been waiting for this. He had never trusted Tyler. He had told me once over a game of poker that the boy had eyes like a coyote looking for a wounded deer. I am listening, Mitchell said. What is the cause of action, breach of contract, I said. Material and fundamental. I am currently in possession of written communication from the bride stating that the primary financier and contract holder, that is me, is barred from the premises of the Golden Oak Resort. However, they are continuing to utilize the services, goods, and insurance coverage paid for and guaranteed by my signature. That is theft of services, Mitchell said immediately. His legal mind was already spinning up the gears. If they are denying you access to the property, they are severing the consideration of the contract. You paid for the event with the understanding that you were the host. If you are not the host, the contract is voidable. Exactly, I said. But I want to go further than voidable. I want immediate termination. I want you to draft a cease and desist order for the unauthorized use of my liability insurance. Without my presence, that policy is effectively a blank check for negligence. If someone trips and breaks a neck on the dance floor right now, I am on the hook. I want that liability severed. Now. I can have the papers drafted in 20 minutes, Mitchell said. I will have a courier run them over. But Doug, you know that stopping the insurance won't physically stop the party. It just exposes them to risk. If you want to shut it down, really shut it down, you need leverage that hurts them right this second. I have that too, I said. I reached for the red folder. Open the file on DC Holdings LLC. Look at the acquisition I made 4 months ago. The distressed asset bundle from Liberty Mutual. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard. Mitchell was fast. He was pulling up the records from the secure server. Silence hung in the air for 10 seconds, heavy and pregnant with anticipation. Then I heard a low whistle. "The Montgomery mortgage," Mitchell whispered. "You bought their debt. I forgot about this. I told you it was a risky buy, but now I see why you did it." "They are in default, Mitch," I said. "They have missed 4 consecutive payments. The terms of the note allow for an acceleration clause." "I know the clause," Mitchell said, his voice dropping into a tone of professional admiration. "It means that upon default, the lender has the right to demand the entire remaining balance of the loan immediately. Not just the missed payments. The whole house." $580,000, I said. "That is the principal, plus interest, plus penalties." And since they are already insolvent, Mitchell added, connecting the dots, they can't pay it, which means you can initiate foreclosure proceedings immediately. I want you to file the notice of default with the county clerk electronically. Today. Right now. And I want a copy of that notice served to Cynthia Montgomery at the reception. "This is nuclear," Doug Mitchell said. "You are not just ruining a party. You are taking their home. You are putting them on the street. This is the parents of your grandchild we are talking about." "I don't have grandchildren, Mitch," I said coldly. "And I don't have a daughter. Not today. Today I am just a creditor. And they are bad debtors." I looked at the picture of me on the security booth in my mind again. The red slash. The humiliation. "Do you know what they did, Mitch?" asked my voice lowering. "They put my picture on the gate. Like I was a criminal. Like I was a stalker. They took the money I earned pouring concrete in the freezing rain and used it to buy champagne to toast my exclusion. They want the lifestyle, Mitch, but they don't want the man who built it." "Say no more," Mitchell said. The playfulness was gone from his voice. It was replaced by the steel of a litigator going for the throat. "I am filing the papers now. I am invoking the acceleration clause. I am also drafting a demand letter for the return of the $150,000 in wedding costs, citing fraud in the inducement. They tricked you into paying under the false pretense that you were a participant." "Can we do that?" I asked. "We can certainly try," Mitchell said. "And even if we lose that part, the legal fees will bury them. They don't have the cash to fight you, Doug. You are a tank rolling over a tent." "Good," I said. "One more thing. The car. The Rolls-Royce. Yeah, it is registered to my private collection. Tyler took the keys from my garage this morning without signing the rental agreement. He said he would bring the paperwork later. He never did." "That is unauthorized use of a motor vehicle," Mitchell said. "Technically, it is grand theft auto given the value of the car." "Call the state troopers," I said. "Report it stolen. Tell them the GPS tracker shows it is at the Golden Oak Resort. Tell them I want it recovered." Doug Mitchell said, pausing for a moment. "If the cops show up to recover a stolen vehicle at a wedding, they are going to arrest the groom. He will spend his wedding night in a holding cell." I leaned back in my chair. I looked at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. "He should have thought about that before he banned the owner of the car from the wedding," I said. "Make the call, Mitch. Consider it done," Mitchell said. "And Doug, yeah. I am sorry it came to this. But damn, I am glad you are finally standing up. You have been carrying that girl on your back for too long. It is time to let her walk. Or crawl." I hung up the phone. The conversation had lasted less than 10 minutes, but the landscape of my life had changed completely. I had just initiated a legal avalanche. In an hour, the county clerk would record the default. In an hour, the police dispatch would broadcast the description of the Rolls-Royce. In an hour, a process server would walk into the ballroom and hand Cynthia Montgomery a piece of paper that said she was homeless. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't joy. It was relief. The heavy burden of trying to please people who could not be pleased was lifting. I had spent years trying to buy their love, trying to earn their respect with checks and favors. I realized now that respect cannot be bought. It must be commanded. I picked up my pen again. I crossed off the first item on my list. Call Mitchell, done. I looked at the second item. The vendors. The legal trap was set. Now it was time to cut the physical lifelines. A lawsuit takes time to hurt. A power outage hurts immediately. I reached for the phone again. I dialed Mike at Flashpoint Generators. The war had begun in the courtroom, but the battle was about to be fought in the dark. I took a sip of the cold coffee on my desk. It tasted bitter, but it kept me awake. I needed to be awake. I didn't want to miss a single second of the collapse. I dialed the number for Mike at Flashpoint Generators. My hand was steady. In the construction world, the relationship between a general contractor and his subs is sacred. It is built on years of prompt payments and mutual survival in a brutal industry. Mike was a good man. He was a man with 3 kids and a mortgage, a man who had started his business with a used truck and a loan I had personally vouched for back in 2010. I knew exactly how he thought. He feared 2 things: God and losing his electrical license. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. In the background, I could hear the thumping bass of a pop song. It sounded like the DJ was warming up the crowd. The noise was a stark contrast to the dead silence of my home office. "Hey, Doug," Mike shouted over the noise. "I can barely hear you, boss. Where are you? I thought you would be backstage checking the amps. The load on these circuits is insane." The bride added 3 extra chandeliers at the last minute. "We are running hot, Doug. Real hot." I leaned into the phone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Mike, listen to me carefully," I said. "I am at home." There was a pause. The music in the background seemed to get louder, mocking me. "Home?" Mike asked, confused. "What do you mean, home? The ceremony starts in 10 minutes. The AC units are pulling maximum draw. I need you to sign off on the variance for the extra lighting. You are the safety officer on the permit, Doug." "That is exactly why I am calling Mike," I said. "I am looking at the contract right now. Section 7, paragraph C. Site supervision. It states that the primary permit holder must be physically present to monitor any temporary power grid exceeding 50 kilowatts. "Yeah, I know the code," Doug, Mike said, sounding nervous. "That is why I need you here. If the fire marshal shows up and you aren't here to show the load calculations, they will shut us down." I took a breath. This was the moment. The lever was in my hand. All I had to do was pull it. "The fire marshal isn't the problem, Mike," I said. "The problem is me. I have been barred from the property. The Montgomery family has refused me entry." What Mike yelled. "That is crazy. You paid for this rig." "It doesn't matter what I paid for," I said. "What matters is the liability. Mike, listen to me. Since I am not on site to supervise the grid, and since the load has been increased without my authorization, I can no longer guarantee the safety of that installation. If a cable melts, if a breaker fails, if a spark jumps and ignites that tent, I am not covered. And neither are you." The background noise seemed to fade as Mike processed the words. He knew what unauthorized load meant. It meant negligence. It meant that if something went wrong, his insurance company would walk away and leave him to face the lawsuits alone. "Doug, are you serious?" Mike asked, his voice dropping. "I just got off the phone with my lawyer." I lied, smoothly blending the timeline. "He advised me to formally notify you that I am withdrawing my safety certification for the event effective immediately. I am pulling the permit, Mike. As of this second, that generator is operating illegally." The line went quiet. I could hear Mike breathing hard. He was caught between a rock and a hard place. On one side, an angry bride. On the other side, financial ruin. "I can't just cut the power," Doug, Mike stammered. "They have food in the warmers. The band is sound checking. The bride is in the makeup chair. If I kill the juice, they will skin me alive." Let them scream, Mike, I said. Screaming doesn't cost you anything. But if that generator overloads and hurts someone, you lose your license. You lose your truck. You lose the business. Is this wedding worth your livelihood? I let the question hang there. I knew the answer. Mike was a survivor. He wasn't going to risk his children's future for a party he wasn't even invited to. I don't know, Mike said. Can't we just wait until the ceremony is over? No, I said firmly. The risk is immediate. You said it yourself. They are running hot, unsupervised. If you don't shut it down, I will have to call the county inspector and report a code violation myself. Don't make me do that, Mike. It was a bluff, mostly. The inspector wouldn't get there for hours. But Mike didn't know that. He just knew that Douglas Carter never made idle threats. Okay, Mike said. The word came out like a sigh of defeat. Okay, Doug. I get it. You are protecting the license. I am protecting us both, Mike, I said. Pull the main breaker. Do it now. I heard the sound of footsteps crunching on gravel. I closed my eyes and imagined the scene. The massive diesel generator, a yellow beast the size of a small car, sitting behind the catering tent. The thick black cables snaking out like veins pumping life into the party. I am at the panel, Mike said. His voice was shaking slightly. Do it, I said. There was a clunk, a heavy mechanical sound of a commercial breaker being thrown. Then through the phone the world changed. The thumping bass music cut out instantly. It didn't fade. It just died. I heard a collective gasp. It was a sound I had never heard before. The sound of 300 people realizing that the magic had just been turned off. Then came the screams. Not screams of terror, but screams of outrage. What happened? I heard a woman yell. My hairdryer, someone else shrieked. Mike came back on the line. It is done, Doug. The grid is cold. Everything is off. The lights, the AC, the sound system, the kitchen warmers. It is dead silence out here. Good man, I said. Now pack up your gear. But Doug, Mike said, sounding terrified. They are coming out of the tent. I can see the groom's father running over here. He looks like he is going to have a heart attack. What do I tell them? Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them the permit holder withdrew authorization due to safety concerns. Tell them to call Douglas Carter if they have a problem. I am getting out of here, Mike said. I am decoupling the cables now. I will be off-site in 10 minutes. Send me the invoice for the cancellation fee, I said. I will pay you full price for the day, Mike. You did the right thing. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, letting the silence of my office wash over me. I tried to picture the scene at the Golden Oak. The massive crystal chandeliers now just useless glass, hanging in the dim, natural light. The expensive air conditioning units spinning down, leaving the tent to slowly heat up under the afternoon sun. The silence of the band. I imagined Tyler running around trying to find an extension cord, not realizing that you cannot power a castle with a AAA battery. I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was the feeling of a job well done. It was the feeling of a structural engineer who had successfully identified a critical failure point and removed the load before the collapse. But the collapse had only just begun. The lights were out, but the hunger was still there. I looked at my list. Item number 3, catering. The guests would be getting hot soon, and when they got hot, they would get hungry. And when they realized there was no food coming, the real chaos would begin. I dialed the number for Sarah at Gourmet Creations. The power was gone. Now I was going to take away the bread. The generator was dead. The silence from the resort was deafening, even from 5 miles away. I could feel the sudden drop in energy, the confusion rippling through the crowd of 300 guests who were suddenly standing in a tent that was rapidly becoming a sauna. But confusion is a manageable state. Hunger, however, is primal. I looked at the clock on my wall. It was 3:15. The ceremony was technically over. The guests would be moving toward the reception area, expecting the lavish cocktail hour I had paid for. They would be expecting the tray past hors d'oeuvres, the mini crab cakes, the beef Wellington bites, the chilled shrimp display that cost more than my first truck. I picked up the phone again. My hand felt heavy but steady. I dialed the number for Sarah, the owner of Gourmet Creations. Sarah was a tough woman. She had to be. In the catering business, you are dealing with bridezillas, drunk uncles, and razor-thin margins every single day. We had a mutual respect. I had renovated her industrial kitchen a few years back, and she had paid me in cash and excellent lasagna. She was honest. And because she was honest, she expected to be paid. The phone rang for a long time. I imagined the chaos in her prep tent. With the power out, her warming ovens were cooling down. Her refrigeration units were silent. She was probably screaming at her staff to keep the walk-in coolers closed. "Hello?" Sarah answered, breathless. Her voice was tight with panic. "Doug, please tell me you are calling with a solution." The power just died. My convection ovens are off. The soufflé is going to collapse. We are in full crisis mode here. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling fan that was still spinning lazily above me. The contrast between my quiet, cool office and her frantic reality was sharp. "I am not calling with a solution, Sarah," I said. "I am calling with an instruction." What she asked distracted. I heard the clatter of pans in the background. Someone yelled about ice. "Stop the service, Sarah!" The background noise seemed to fade away as Sarah processed my words. "Stop the service," she repeated, confused. "What do you mean? We have 300 lobster tails prepped. The filet mignon is seared. We are 5 minutes away from plating the first course." "Do not plate it," I said. "Do not serve a single crumb." "Doug." "Are you crazy?" she hissed. "The bride is screaming. Her mother is threatening to sue me if the appetizers don't go out in 2 minutes. They are saying it is just a blown fuse. They say the power will be back any second." "The power isn't coming back, Sarah," I said. "I had Mike pull the generator, and now I am pulling the payment." There was a stunned silence on the other end. I logged into the payment portal 5 minutes ago. I continued, my voice flat and businesslike. "You know the terms of our contract. The final 50% of the balance was scheduled for automatic release at 4 p.m. today upon successful commencement of dinner service. I have canceled that transfer." Sarah gasped. "Doug, that is $40,000. You can't just cancel it." "I have already bought the food. I have 20 waiters on the clock." "I am not stiffing you, Sarah," I said quickly. "I would never do that to you. I will write you a personal check for your costs. I will cover the food, the labor, the waste. You will not lose a dime today, but you cannot serve that food to them." "Why?" she whispered. "Because they banned me, Sarah." I let the words hang there. I didn't need to explain the heartbreak. I didn't need to tell her about the photo on the gate. Sarah had kids. She understood the basic laws of family and respect. "They banned me from my daughter's wedding," I said. "But they kept my menu. They kept the wine I selected. They kept the food I paid for. They want to eat at my table, Sarah, but they don't want me in the room." That is evil, Doug," she said softly. "It is business," I corrected her. "And right now my business is closed. If you serve that food, you are serving it for free, because the authorized payer has left the building." I heard Sarah take a deep breath. I could hear the steel returning to her spine. She was a businesswoman first. "So if I put a plate down on a table, I am eating the cost?" she asked. "Exactly," I said. "Unless Cynthia Montgomery has $40,000 in cash in her purse right now, which I assure you she does not." I heard a commotion in the background. I heard Cynthia's shrill voice screaming at someone. "Where are the crab cakes?" Cynthia yelled. "My guests are starving. Why is the staff standing around?" Sarah's voice came back on the line lower this time. She is here, Doug. She is in my face. Tell her I said. I waited. I held the phone tight against my ear. I wanted to hear this. I heard Sarah clear her throat. I heard her step away from the phone, but she left the line open. Mrs. Montgomery. I heard Sarah say, her voice projecting with the authority of a head chef. Please step back from the pass. Don't tell me what to do, Cynthia shrieked. Serve the food. There will be no food, Sarah said. Her voice was calm, icy. The client has canceled the contract. What client? Cynthia yelled. I am the client. My son is the groom. Mr. Douglas Carter is the client, Sarah said. He is the one who signed the check. And he just informed me that payment has been suspended. Unless you can provide a valid credit card for a $40,000 hold right now, my staff is packing up. There was a silence. A beautiful, absolute silence. You are bluffing, Cynthia spat. You wouldn't dare. We will sue you. Pack it up, Sarah yelled to her staff. Her voice boomed through the tent. Wrap the lobster, box the steaks, load the truck. We are moving out. No, Cynthia screamed. You can't. We just did, Sarah said. I heard the sounds of a kitchen shutting down, the clatter of trays being slid into racks, the sound of plastic wrap being torn, the sound of a metal rolling door slamming shut. Sarah came back to the phone. It is done, Doug, she said. The kitchen is closed. Thank you, Sarah, I said. I will have a check on your desk Monday morning. I hope you know what you are doing, Doug, she said. They look ready to kill someone out here. Let them eat cake, I said. Oh, wait. I paid for the cake, too. Take it with you. I heard a small dark chuckle from Sarah. With pleasure, she said. It is a lemon chiffon. My favorite. I hung up. I sat there imagining the scene. 300 guests in their tuxedos and gowns, sweating in the heat, their stomachs rumbling. They would look toward the kitchen doors expecting waiters with silver trays. Instead, they would see the taillights of the catering trucks pulling away, taking the lobster, the steak, and the lemon chiffon cake with them. I felt a pang of hunger myself. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I walked to my own kitchen. I opened the fridge. It was mostly empty, just a few beers and some leftover pizza. I took out a slice of cold pizza. I took a bite. It was rubbery and stale. But as I chewed it, I thought about the filet mignon that was currently being driven away from the Golden Oak. It tasted like the best meal I had ever had. The food was gone. The power was gone. The comfort was gone. But the party wasn't over yet. They still had a roof over their heads. They still had the illusion that this was just a series of unfortunate accidents. They didn't know yet that the ground beneath their feet was about to disappear. I looked at my list. Item number 4, the venue, security and liability. It was time to make the call that would physically remove them from the property. It was time to call the owner of the Golden Oak. I finished my pizza. I wiped the crumbs from my mouth. The appetizer course was over. Now for the main event. The lights were out. The food was gone. But they were still there. I could feel them. 300 people huddled in the darkening tent, whispering, complaining, waiting for someone to fix the glitch. They still believed this was a mistake. They thought it was bad luck, a blown fuse, a kitchen mishap. They were clinging to the idea that the wedding would go on, that the champagne would flow again, and that they would dance into the night, celebrating a union built on my money and their lies. They were wrong. I had stripped away the comfort. I had stripped away the sustenance. Now it was time to strip away the ground beneath their feet. I looked at the final name on my list. Marcus Thorne. Marcus was the owner of the Golden Oak Resort. We were not friends exactly. We were associates. I had fixed the foundation of his north wing when it started sinking into the mud 3 years ago. I saved his building then. Today, I was going to use that same building to crush my daughter's ego. I dialed his private cell number. He answered on the first ring. I could hear the stress in his voice. He was a man who prided himself on perfection, and his resort was currently in chaos. Doug Marcus said, his voice tight. "Thank God you called. I am trying to find you. My staff says you are not on site. We have a total blackout here. The generator guy just packed up and left. The caterers are driving away." "What is happening?" "I am at home, Marcus," I said. I was sitting in my leather chair watching the shadows lengthen across my desk. "Home," Marcus repeated. "Why are you home? You are the host." "Not anymore," I said. "I have been barred from the property, Marcus. Your security team, at the instruction of the Montgomery family, denied me entry. They have a photo of me at the gate with a red line through it." There was a pause. I could hear Marcus breathing. He knew what this meant. He knew the contracts as well as I did. "They banned the signer," Marcus whispered. "They did," I said. "And because they banned the signer, they have voided the supervision clause of the liability insurance policy." I picked up the document from my desk. It was a standard event policy underwritten by Lloyd's of London. It was comprehensive, expensive, and very specific. "I am looking at the policy right now, Marcus." I continued, my voice calm and relentless. Clause 4A. Premises liability. It states that coverage is contingent upon the presence of the insured party to authorize safety protocols. Since I am not there, and since the generator was operating without my oversight, the policy is null and void. I let that sink in. "Marcus," I said, "you have 300 people in a dark tent. They are drinking alcohol. The floor is uneven. There are glass centerpieces everywhere. If one person trips in the dark, if one person cuts their foot, if one person gets into a fight, you are not covered. My insurance is gone. You are operating an uninsured high-risk event on your property right now." I heard Marcus curse. It was a low, ugly word. He knew the law. He knew that one lawsuit from a drunk guest could bankrupt his resort if he didn't have coverage. "I am formally notifying you," I said, driving the nail into the coffin. "I have canceled the binder. As of 5 minutes ago, that wedding is an unauthorized gathering on private property. If you let them stay, you are accepting 100% of the liability." "You are putting a gun to my head," Doug Marcus said. "No," I said. "I am taking the bullets out of mine. I am not going to lose my retirement because Tyler Montgomery wants to play rich kid in the dark." "What do you want me to do?" Marcus asked. "You know what to do," I said. "Evict them." "Evict them," Marcus repeated. "Doug, it is a wedding. The bride is crying in the lobby. The groom is threatening to sue my staff." "Let him sue," I said. "He has no money. But if you let them stay and someone gets hurt, I will testify that I warned you. I will testify that you knowingly allowed an uninsured event to continue." Marcus was silent for a long moment. I could hear the calculations running through his head. He was a businessman. He weighed the tears of a bride against the survival of his business. The business always wins. "Okay," Marcus said. His voice was cold now. "Professional. I am shutting it down." "And Marcus," I added. "What?" "That security guard at the gate? The one with the tactical vest? The one who told me I was riffraff?" "Yeah, I know him." "Send him to do it," I said. "Tell him to go into that tent and tell the Montgomery family that they have 30 minutes to vacate the premises. Tell him to tell them that the party is over because the check bounced." I heard a dry chuckle from Marcus. "You are a cruel man, Doug. I learned from the best," I said. I hung up the phone. The final wall had fallen. The fortress was breached. I sat back and closed my eyes. I could see it. I could see Marcus walking into the security office. I could see him barking orders. I could see that arrogant guard, the one who had sneered at my truck, now having to walk into the VIP tent. I imagined the scene. The guard clearing his throat. The guests looking up from their phones. their faces illuminated by the pale glow of screens in the darkness. "Ladies and gentlemen," the guard would say, "this event has been cancelled due to lack of insurance. The owner has ordered an immediate evacuation of the property. You have 30 minutes to leave or the police will be called for trespassing." I imagined Brittany's face. I imagined Cynthia's face. They had wanted a private event. They had wanted exclusivity. Well, they were about to get the most exclusive experience of all, an eviction. The silence in my office was absolute now. The work was done. The contracts were voided. The money was stopped. The house was foreclosed. The car was reported stolen. The venue was reclaiming its land. I stood up. My knees popped. I felt tired. Not the good tired that comes after a hard day of pouring concrete. This was the deep soul, weary tiredness of a man who had just amputated his own limb to survive gangrene. I walked over to the window. The sun was starting to set. The sky was turning a bruised purple. I looked down at the driveway. My truck was sitting there covered in dust. It was the only honest thing in my life. I thought about going to sleep, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. Not yet. There was one act left in this tragedy. The fallout. They would come here. They had nowhere else to go. Their house was locked. Their hotel rooms were likely cancelled by Marcus as well. They would come back to the safety net. They would come back to the man they despised because he was the only one with a roof that didn't leak. I needed to be ready. I walked out of the office. I locked the door. I put the key in my pocket. I walked to the front door of the house. I checked the deadbolt. It was solid brass. I had installed it myself. I walked to the security panel on the wall. I punched in the code. The system beeped. Armed. I was not letting them in. Not tonight. Not ever again. I went to the kitchen. I opened a beer. I sat on the back porch watching the twilight settle over the trees. I waited for the headlights. I waited for the screaming. I waited for the final realization that the bank of Dad was closed for business. I took a sip of beer. It was cold. It was bitter. It was perfect. The ghost at the gate had gone home, and he had taken the keys to the kingdom with him. The beer bottle on the porch was empty, but I wasn't ready to sleep. Alcohol dulls the senses, and right now I wanted my mind to be as sharp as a diamond cutter. I wanted to feel every edge of this moment. So I went back into the kitchen and did something I hadn't done at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in years. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, dark roast, strong enough to wake the dead, though it seemed nothing could wake the people currently trapped in the dark at the Golden Oak Resort. I carried the steaming mug back to my office. The sun had officially set. The room was filled with shadows, but the desk was illuminated by a single pulsating light. My cell phone. It was sitting on the mahogany surface, vibrating with such intensity that it was slowly inching its way toward the edge. It looked like a living thing in the throes of a seizure. The screen was lighting up so fast, it looked like a strobe light. Flash, buzz, flash, buzz, flash, buzz. I sat down in my leather chair, taking a slow, deliberate sip of the hot coffee. The bitterness hit the back of my throat, grounding me. I didn't reach for the phone immediately. I just watched it. In my line of work, you learn to read vibration. You know the difference between the low hum of a generator running smoothly and the violent shudder of a machine about to tear itself apart. This phone was the latter. It was the physical manifestation of a social structure collapsing in real time. I leaned forward and tapped the screen to wake it fully. The notification center was a solid wall of text. 47 missed calls, 82 text messages, 15 voicemails, and the numbers were climbing every second. I scrolled through the preview list. It was a fascinating case study in human psychology. You could trace the exact timeline of my demolition project just by reading the first few words of the texts. 3:05 p.m. Brittany. Dad. Where are you, people are asking. 3:10 p.m. Brittany. Pick up the phone. This isn't funny. 3:15 p.m. Tyler. Hey, Doug, the power just cut. Call the electric guy ASAP. 3:17 p.m. Cynthia. Unacceptable. Fix this now. 3:25 p.m. Brittany. Why is the kitchen truck leaving Dad? 3:30 p.m. Tyler. Pick up the phone, you old bastard. I smiled. The transition from confusion to panic to aggression was textbook. They still thought they had power. They still thought that by typing in all caps they could command electricity to flow and food to appear. I took another sip of coffee. I decided it was time to listen to the music. I didn't answer the live calls coming in. That would be too messy. I wanted the curated experience. I wanted to hear their unfiltered thoughts when they thought they were speaking to a machine. I tapped the voicemail icon. I put the phone on speaker and set it in the center of the desk. First message. 3:12 p.m. Brittany. The background noise was the first thing I noticed. It was a low murmur of hundreds of people, the sound of a hive that had been disturbed. Daddy Brittany's voice was high-tight with stress. She wasn't crying yet. She was in management mode. Daddy, I don't know what is happening, but the lights are out. The AC is off. It is getting really hot in here, and my makeup is starting to run. The coordinator says the generator is gone. How can the generator be gone? You need to come back here and fix this. Tyler is freaking out. Just get here. Okay. Bye. I deleted the message. It was too soft. She still thought it was an accident. She still called me Daddy because she needed something. Second message. 3:20 p.m. Cynthia Montgomery. Her voice was like a drill bit grinding against metal. Douglas, this is Cynthia. I don't know what kind of cut-rate vendors you hired, but this is a disaster. It is a sauna in this tent. The guests are sweating, and now the caterers are refusing to serve. They are packing up the lobster. Douglas, do you hear me? The lobster. You need to call them and give them your credit card number immediately. I will not be humiliated like this. If this isn't fixed in 5 minutes, I am going to make sure you never see your daughter again. I laughed. A dry, rasping sound in the empty room. She was threatening to take away something she had already stolen. She was trying to evict a man who had already left the building. Delete. Third message. 3:35 p.m. Tyler. The background noise had changed. The murmurs were louder now. I heard glass breaking. I heard someone shouting about a refund. Listen to me, old man. Tyler sounded breathless. He was probably running around in the dark, sweating in his rental tuxedo. I know you did this. The generator guy said you pulled the permit. Are you insane? Do you have dementia? You are ruining the most important day of my life. My dad is going to sue you for everything you have. Turn the power back on. Turn it back on, or I swear to God I will come over there and... The message cut off. He must have hit the time limit or thrown the phone. I didn't delete that one. I saved it. It would be useful for the restraining order later. I took a long drink of coffee. The caffeine was kicking in, sharpening my focus. The symphony was reaching its crescendo. Fourth message. 3:50 p.m. Brittany again. This one was different. The management mode was gone. The entitlement was cracking. She was crying now. Dad, please pick up. It is a disaster. It is pitch black. People are using their phone flashlights. It looks like a horror movie. Mom Montgomery is screaming at the waiters, but they just drove away. They took the cake, Dad. They took the cake. Why are you doing this? I know you are mad about the gate thing, but isn't this too much? It was just a picture. We just wanted it to be perfect. Please, Dad. I am scared. Tyler is yelling at everyone. Please come save me. I stared at the phone. My hand hovered over the device. Please come save me. That was the hook. That was the line she had used her entire life. When she failed math, Daddy save me. When she crashed her car, Daddy save me. When she overspent her credit card, Daddy save me. And every single time for 26 years, I had put on my cape and saved her. I had fixed the grades, fixed the car, paid the bills. I had taught her that actions didn't have consequences because her father was the safety net. But a safety net only works if the acrobat respects the gravity. If they spit on the net, eventually the net gets taken away. I did not save the message. I did not delete it. I just let it sit there, a digital monument to too little, too late. The phone buzzed again. A text message popped up. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Carter, this is Richard Montgomery. We need to talk. Man to man, pick up. I ignored it. Richard Montgomery wanted to talk man to man only when his checkbook was empty. When he thought he was rich, I was just the help. I picked up the mug and walked over to the window. It was fully dark outside now. The crickets were chirping a peaceful, rhythmic sound that contrasted sharply with the chaotic noise I had just heard on the speaker. I wondered what was happening at that exact second. The 30-minute deadline I had given Marcus was almost up. The security guard, the one I had sent to do my dirty work, would be entering the tent right about now. I imagined the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness, slicing through the smoke of extinguished candles and the humidity of 300 sweating bodies. I imagined him raising his voice not to announce the arrival of the bride, but to announce the arrival of reality. My phone started vibrating again. A new wave of messages. The tone had shifted. 3:55 p.m. Tyler. The cops, you called the cops. 3:56 p.m. Cynthia. They are kicking us out. They are saying we are trespassing. Douglas. You are a monster. 3:57 p.m. Brittany. Dad, they are towing the Rolls Royce. Tyler is being handcuffed. Dad. I walked back to the desk. I looked at the text about the handcuffs. So Mitchell had been efficient. He hadn't just reported the car stolen. He had timed it perfectly. The police had arrived exactly when the eviction notice was being served. I sipped my coffee. It was getting cold, but I didn't mind. I pictured Tyler, the golden boy, the trust fund baby who had sneered at my work boots. He was probably pressed against the hood of my vintage Rolls Royce right now, his hands zip-tied behind his back reading his Miranda rights, while his guests watched by the light of their iPhones. It was a cruel image, a brutal image. But then I remembered the photo on the gate. I remembered the red slash across my face. I remembered the email where my daughter called me a wallet with legs. They wanted a memorable wedding. I had given them one. They would talk about this day for the rest of their lives. It just wouldn't be the story they wanted to tell in the society pages. I sat down and unlocked the phone again. I went to the settings menu. I didn't want to turn the phone off. I needed it on for the lawyers. I needed it on to record the evidence of their harassment. But I didn't need to hear it anymore. The concert was over. The finale had been played. I toggled the switch on the side of the phone. Silent mode. The vibrating stopped. The flashing screen continued lighting up the room like a distant lighthouse in a storm, but the sound was gone. Peace. I leaned back in the chair, the leather groaning softly. I felt lighter. The anger that had been a tight knot in my chest for hours was unraveling, replaced by a strange, hollow clarity. I had destroyed the village to save my dignity. But the night wasn't over. The fallout was just beginning. They were leaving the resort now. I knew the geography of the area. There were no other hotels nearby with vacancy on a Saturday night. Their house was locked and foreclosure notices were taped to the door. There was only one place left for them to go. I looked at the digital clock on my desk. 4:05 p.m. Give them 45 minutes to scream at the police. 45 minutes to drive here. They would be at my gate by 5:30. I finished the coffee. I placed the mug on the coaster. I was ready for the encore. But this time, the audience wouldn't be getting in. I stared at the phone. It was vibrating again. The name on the screen was Cynthia Montgomery. This was the 5th time she had called in the last 3 minutes. The previous 4 times I had let it go to voicemail, enjoying the image of her screaming into the void. But now the time for games was over. I had listened to the music of their panic long enough. It was time to step onto the stage and deliver the final aria. I picked up the phone. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask how the wedding was going. I simply pressed the green button, put the phone to my ear, and waited. For a moment, there was only the sound of heavy breathing and chaotic background noise. I could hear a siren wailing in the distance on her end. I could hear the murmur of 300 angry guests. Douglas Cynthia screamed. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was shredded, hysterical, stripped of all its fake high society polish. You pick up the phone right now. You pick it up and you fix this. Do you hear me? I am here, Cynthia, I said. My voice was low, calm, the voice of a man sitting in a comfortable chair in a climate-controlled room. I hear you perfectly. You are a monster, she shrieked. You are a petty, vindictive little man. How dare you? How dare you cut the power? How dare you send the caterers away? My friends are standing in the dark. The senator is here. Do you know how humiliated I am? I took a sip of my coffee. I let her scream. It was important to let her empty the tank before I lit the match. You are going to pay for this, she continued, her voice cracking. My husband is calling his lawyers. We are going to sue you for breach of contract. We are going to sue you for emotional distress. We are going to take your house, Douglas. We are going to take that little construction company of yours and burn it to the ground. Are you done? I asked. No, I am not done, she yelled. I want the lights back on, now. I want the food back, now. And I want you to apologize to Tyler. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. The red folder was open in front of me. The document titled Promissory Note Assignment was gleaming under the desk lamp. Cynthia, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You need to stop talking. You need to stop talking and listen very carefully, because the next 60 seconds are going to determine whether you sleep in a bed tonight or on a park bench. Something in my tone made her pause. The screaming stopped. What are you talking about? She snapped, though there was a tremor of fear in her voice now. You mentioned lawyers, I said. You mentioned suing me. You mentioned taking my house. That is very interesting, Cynthia, because I have been looking at some paperwork of my own. Specifically, I am looking at the public records for a property at 42 Fairview Lane. That is your address, isn't it? Silence. Absolute silence on the line. I continued reading from the document. It seems that the owners of that property, Richard and Cynthia Montgomery, haven't made a mortgage payment in 4 months. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings, but then a miracle happened. The debt was sold. A private equity firm bought the distressed note. So what? Cynthia hissed. We are refinancing. It is none of your business. It became my business 4 months ago, I said. Do you know the name of the company that bought your debt? It is called DC Holdings, LLC. I waited. I let the name hang in the air. DC Douglas Carter. Cynthia was not a smart woman, but she was not entirely stupid. I could hear the gears turning in her head. I could hear the moment the realization hit her like a physical blow. No, she whispered. That is impossible. It is very possible, I said. In fact, it is reality. I own your mortgage, Cynthia. I own your house. I own the roof over your head and the floor under your feet. I am the bank. And as the bank, I have been very patient. I let you slide for 4 months because I thought we were going to be family. I thought I was helping the mother of my son-in-law. I paused, letting the silence stretch. But then I continued, my voice hardening into steel. You put a picture of me on a gate. You called me riff-raff. You said I wasn't good enough to walk into a party I paid for. You decided to treat the man who holds your life in his hands like a piece of garbage. Douglas, please, she stammered. Her voice was unrecognizable now. It was small. It was terrified. We didn't mean it. It was just for the image. The image, I repeated. Well, let's talk about the image, Cynthia. The image is that you are bankrupt. The image is that you are frauds. And the reality is that I just instructed my lawyer to execute the acceleration clause on your mortgage. What does that mean? She cried. It means the full balance is due immediately, I said. $580,000, payable today. Since I know you don't have it, the foreclosure notice has already been filed electronically. A process server is on his way to the reception right now to hand you the eviction papers. By the time you drive home tonight, the locks will be changed. No, she wailed. You can't do that. It is illegal. It is perfectly legal, I said. It is business. Just like barring me from the wedding was a business decision for you, this is a business decision for me. I am liquidating a bad asset. I could hear her sobbing now, deep guttural sobs of a woman watching her entire world crumble. But I wasn't done. I had one more card to play. The ace of spades. And Cynthia, I said, cutting through her tears, we need to talk about the car. The car, she hiccuped. The Rolls-Royce, I said. The vintage silver Cloud that Tyler is driving. The one he drove my daughter in. What about it? She asked, sniffling. Tyler took the keys from my garage this morning, I said. He told me he would sign the rental agreement when he picked it up. He never signed it. He just drove off. So what she said, her voice rising again with a hint of her old arrogance. He is your son-in-law. He borrowed it. He is not my son-in-law, I said. Not legally. Not until the marriage license is signed. And since the wedding is currently a disaster, I doubt that is happening today. Which means, legally speaking, a stranger took a $200,000 vehicle from my property without a contract. Douglas, don't, she whispered. I already did, I said. I reported it stolen 20 minutes ago. You called the police on Tyler, she screamed. I reported a theft. I corrected her. I gave them the GPS location. They should be arriving at the Golden Oak right about now. As if on cue, the siren I had heard in the background suddenly got louder, much louder. It stopped being a background noise and became the soundtrack of the call. I heard shouting on her end. I heard a male voice yelling. It sounded like Tyler. Mom! Mom, the cops are here. I heard Cynthia drop the phone. It clattered against something hard, probably a table, but the line didn't disconnect. I could hear everything. I sat there in my office listening to the audio drama of my own making. I heard the heavy, authoritative voice of a state trooper. Tyler Montgomery, step away from the vehicle. Put your hands where I can see them. I heard Tyler screaming. This is my father-in-law's car. It is a mistake. Call him. Call Doug. I heard the click of handcuffs. I heard Cynthia screaming at the officers. Do you know who we are? And then I heard the trooper's response. It was dry, professional, and beautiful. Ma'am, step back or you will be arrested for obstruction. This vehicle has been reported stolen by the owner, Mr. Douglas Carter. We are impounding the vehicle and detaining the suspect. I picked up my coffee cup. I swirled the remaining liquid. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. It tasted like victory. I waited until I heard the car door slam shut. I waited until I heard the police cruiser's engine rev. Then I spoke into the phone, knowing Cynthia was probably scrambling on the ground to pick it up. Cynthia. I said loud enough for the microphone to pick up. Are you there? I heard fumbling, then her breathing jagged and panicked. You destroyed us, she whispered. You destroyed everything. No, Cynthia, I said. I just turned on the lights. You were always destroyed. You just didn't want anyone to see it. Where are we supposed to go? She sobbed. Our house is gone. The car is gone. Where do we go? I looked out my window. The driveway was empty. The gate was closed. I don't know, I said. But don't come here. There is a new sign on my gate. It says, no trespassing. And unlike you, I have the means to enforce it. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I looked at the red button. Goodbye, Cynthia, I said. I pressed the button. The connection severed. The room was quiet again. The only sound was the humming of my computer tower. I sat there for a long time. I thought about the car. I loved that Rolls-Royce. It would take weeks to get it out of the impound lot. It might have a scratch on it from the towing, but it was worth it. I had stripped them naked. I had taken their shelter, their transportation, their food, and their dignity. I had shown them that without the foundation I provided, they were just people standing in a field in the dark. I looked at the red folder on my desk, the mortgage papers. I picked them up and walked over to the shredder in the corner. I thought about shredding them. I thought about forgiving the debt, about being the bigger man. Then I remembered the red line across my face. I put the folder back in the safe. I spun the dial. I wasn't going to shred them. I was going to frame them. The phone didn't ring again. They knew. They finally understood. The wallet had closed. The bank had failed. And the ghost at the gate had become the monster in the dark. I stood up and stretched. My back cracked. I felt old, but I felt clean. I walked out of the office and turned off the light, leaving the room in darkness. Just like the wedding tent. But unlike them, I knew where the light switch was, and I chose to leave it off. I did not need to use my imagination for the finale. In the modern world, tragedy is not just experienced, it is broadcast. I sat at my desk, the dark coffee in my mug now completely cold, and I turned my attention to the computer screen. I had two windows open. On the left was the venue security feed, which I still had access to, because my login credentials as the primary account holder had never been revoked. On the right was Facebook, specifically the live stream of a woman named Jessica, one of Brittany's bridesmaids, who I knew had a habit of documenting every second of her life. The two screens offered a perfect synchronized view of the apocalypse. On the security feed, the scene was grainy and black and white, illuminated only by the strobe-like flashing of red and blue lights. The police had arrived. Not just one cruiser, but three. Their lights cut through the darkness of the resort grounds, bouncing off the trees and creating a disorienting strobing effect that made the panicked guests look like dancers in a silent, terrifying rave. On the Facebook live stream, the audio was chaos. Jessica was holding her phone with shaking hands, filming the driveway. "Oh my God, guys," Jessica was whispering into the microphone, her voice trembling. "The police are literally arresting the groom. This is insane. I think the dad called the cops. This is the craziest wedding ever." I leaned closer to the screen. The camera zoomed in on the vintage Rolls-Royce. It was parked right in front of the main entrance, the centerpiece of the wedding photos that would never be taken. Two state troopers were standing next to it. One of them had Tyler pressed against the hood. The polished silver of the car, which I had spent years restoring, was now being used as a booking table. I cranked up the volume. "Get off me," Tyler was screaming. His voice was high and shrill, cracking with fear. "I told you my father-in-law lent it to me. He is senile. He forgot. Call him. Just call him." "We did call him," the trooper barked, his voice cutting through the noise. "He confirmed the vehicle is stolen. You are under arrest for grand theft auto. You have the right to remain silent." I watched as the trooper pulled Tyler's arms behind his back. The zip ties made a sharp zipping sound that the microphone picked up clearly. Tyler thrashed, kicking at the tire of the rolls. "Watch the paint, kid," I whispered to the screen. Then the frame shifted. Cynthia Montgomery came charging into the shot. In the harsh glare of the police headlights, she looked like a banshee. Her expensive gown was dragging in the gravel. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was coming undone. "Don't you touch my son," she shrieked, grabbing the trooper's arm. "Do you know who we are? We are the Montgomerys. We own half this town." "Ma'am, step back," the second trooper yelled, putting a hand on his holster. "You are interfering with an arrest. Step back or you will join him. We are being evicted." Cynthia wailed, throwing her hands in the air. "We are being evicted from our own wedding. Where is Douglas? Where is that coward?" "I know he is watching." She looked directly into the camera lens of the bridesmaid's phone, her eyes wild and rimmed with smeared mascara. For a second, it felt like she was looking right at me through the screen. I didn't blink. I took a sip of cold coffee. But the real tragedy wasn't the arrest. The real tragedy, the part that made me sit up straight in my chair, was what happened next. Brittany ran into the frame. She was still wearing her wedding dress. It was a custom designer gown that cost $12,000. Now the hem was black with mud. She had lost one of her shoes. She was limping slightly. She looked small. She looked young. She looked like the little girl who used to scrape her knee and come running to me for a Band-Aid. "Tyler," I sobbed, reaching for him. "Tyler, baby, it is okay. We will fix this. My dad is just having a tantrum. I will talk to him. I will make him drop the charges." She reached out to touch his face. She wanted to comfort him. She wanted to be the loyal wife standing by her man. And that was when the mask fell off. Tyler didn't lean into her touch. He jerked his head away violently, as if her hand was made of acid. He looked at her with the facial expression I will never forget. It wasn't love. It wasn't fear. It was pure, unadulterated loathing. "Get away from me," Tyler spat. Brittany froze. "What?" "You did this," Tyler screamed, struggling against the cuffs. "You and your psycho father. You said he was just a checkbook. You said he was a soft touch. You lied to me." "I didn't know," Brittany cried, tears streaming down her face. "You are useless," Tyler yelled, his voice echoing off the walls of the resort. "Look at you. You are nothing without his money. We have no house, we have no car, we have nothing. I am going to jail because of you." "Tyler, please," Brittany begged, grabbing his lapel. "I love you." "I don't want your love," Tyler roared, shoving her away with his shoulder. "I wanted the life you promised me. You are a fraud, Brittany. Your whole family is trash." The force of his shove sent Brittany stumbling backward. She tripped over the hem of her dress and fell hard onto the gravel driveway. The crowd gasped. The live stream comments went wild. I watched my daughter sitting in the dirt, looking up at the man she was supposed to spend her life with. In that moment, the illusion shattered completely. She wasn't looking at a prince. She was looking at a parasite who was angry that the host had stopped feeding him. I waited for someone to help her. I looked at the guests. There were hundreds of them standing around, holding their phones, watching the drama unfolding, like it was a Netflix series. These were her friends, her sorority sisters, her colleagues. Not a single person moved to help her up. They were too busy filming. They were too busy whispering. I saw the senator, the guest of honor Cynthia had bragged about, quietly slipping out the side exit, trying to avoid being seen near a crime scene. Brittany sat there alone. The white dress was ruined. The fairy tale was dead. The police shoved Tyler into the back of the cruiser. He ducked his head, cursing. Cynthia was still screaming at the hotel manager, who was standing there with a clipboard looking bored. The security feed showed the wider angle. I saw the stream of cars leaving the parking lot. The red taillights formed a long, snaking river of abandonment. The rats were fleeing the ship. They had come for the free lobster and the open bar. Now that the food was gone and the cops were here, they had no reason to stay. There was no loyalty in that crowd. There was only appetite. I watched Brittany slowly stand up. She brushed the gravel off her palms. She looked around. She looked at her mother-in-law, who was too busy arguing about her own reputation to notice her son had just assaulted his bride. She looked at the guests who turned their faces away. She stood alone in the center of the driveway, illuminated by the harsh blue strobe of the police lights. She looked lost. For a second, my hand twitched toward the keys in my pocket. The instinct to rush over there to pick her up, to wrap my jacket around her, and take her home was overwhelming. It was biological. It was the father in me screaming to protect his child. But I forced my hand to stay on the desk. I couldn't save her from this. I had saved her from the bad grades. I had saved her from the car accidents. I had saved her from the credit card debt. And because I had saved her, she had never learned to stand up. She had chosen a man who treated her like an accessory because she didn't know her own value. If I went there now, if I bailed Tyler out, if I paid off the venue, nothing would change. She would go back to him. She would blame me for the embarrassment. She would learn nothing. Pain is a teacher. And tonight class was in session. I watched as she walked away from the crowd. She didn't go to her mother-in-law. She walked toward her car. She walked with a limp. The live stream ended as the bridesmaid decided she had seen enough and cut the feed. The screen went black. I turned back to the security feed. The police cars were pulling away, taking Tyler to the county lockup. The guests were almost gone. The resort staff were beginning to stack the chairs. It was over. The silence in my office felt different now. It wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the heavy, final silence of a demolition site after the dust has settled. The building was down. The structure was gone. All that was left was the debris. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark for a moment, listening to the beating of my own heart. I felt a profound sadness, but no regret. I had done what I had to do. I had revealed the truth. It was ugly. It was naked. It was brutal. But it was the truth. Now I just had to wait for the knock on the door. I knew she was coming. She had nowhere else to go. I stood up and walked out of the office, heading toward the front of the house. I checked the intercom system on the wall. It was working. I wasn't going to open the door. Not yet. I needed to know which version of my daughter was coming home. Was it the brat who called me a wallet? Or was it the woman who had finally woken up? I went to the living room and sat on the couch facing the front door. I waited. It was 5:45 when the gate buzzer finally sounded. It was not the polite, rhythmic chime of a visitor. It was a jagged, continuous noise, the sound of a thumb pressing down on the button and refusing to let go. I sat on the couch in the living room facing the wall-mounted monitor. The screen flickered to life in black and white. There she was. Brittany stood alone at the end of the driveway. The $12,000 custom gown was ruined. The hem was heavy with mud and grease. One of the lace sleeves was torn. She wasn't wearing shoes. She was shivering, hugging herself against the evening chill. The confident, arrogant woman who had sent me that email about being a wallet with legs was gone. In her place was a frightened child who had burned down her own house and was now looking for a place to get warm. I stood up and walked to the intercom panel. I did not unlock the gate. I simply pressed the talk button. "Go home, Brittany," I said. My voice was calm, amplified by the speaker at the gate. "Dad," she sobbed, looking up at the camera lens. Her face was streaked with mascara. "Dad, please open the gate. I have nowhere to go. Tyler is in jail. His parents left me there. They blamed me for everything. Please, Dad. It is cold." I watched her on the screen. I felt a twinge in my chest, the old instinct to protect her, to fix it, to write a check, and make the bad things go away. but I looked at my hands. The hands she despised. The hands of a laborer. You have a home, Brittany, I said. You have a husband. You chose him. You chose his family. You chose their values. He is a monster, she wailed. He screamed at me. He pushed me. He is who he always was, I said. You just didn't care because the money was loud enough to cover the noise. Well, the money is gone now. And so is the noise. Dad, stop it, she screamed, hitting the metal bars of the gate with her fist. Stop teaching me a lesson. I get it. Okay, I get it. I am sorry about the picture. I am sorry about the gate. Just let me in. I am your daughter. I leaned closer to the microphone. No, I said. You are not my daughter. My daughter would never have treated a human being the way you treated me today. My daughter knew the value of loyalty. You are a stranger who happens to share my last name. And as you made very clear on the sign you posted, strangers are not admitted. Dad. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. What am I supposed to do? You are an adult, Brittany, I said. You are smart. You have a degree I paid for. Figure it out. Walk to the main road. Call a taxi. Get a job. Start a life that is actually yours, not one bought with my credit. I took my finger off the button. Dad, she screamed. Dad. I reached out and pressed the power button on the monitor. The screen went black. Her image vanished. The sound of her crying was cut off instantly. I stood in the hallway for a moment. The house was silent. The only sound was the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I walked to the front door. I flipped the switch for the porch light. Through the frosted glass, I saw the yellow glow outside extinguish, plunging the driveway into darkness. I didn't wait to see if she walked away. I didn't wait to see if she called a friend. It wasn't my site anymore. I had pulled the permit. The inspection was over. I turned around and walked down the hall to my bedroom. I took off my suit jacket and hung it carefully in the closet. I loosened my tie. I sat on the edge of the bed and took off my shoes. I lay down and pulled the quilt up to my chin. It was warm. It was quiet. For the first time in 26 years, I didn't have to worry about saving anyone. I closed my eyes. The ghost at the gate was gone, and the man inside was finally free. I spent 40 years ensuring the structural integrity of skyscrapers, yet I failed to see the cracks in my own home until the roof caved in. I learned that you cannot buy respect no matter how many checks you sign. I learned that being a good father does not mean being an endless resource. Sometimes it means being the wall that forces your child to stop running from reality. Walking away from Brittany was not an act of cruelty. It was an act of necessary destruction. By letting her fall, I finally gave her the chance to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet. A foundation built on guilt will always collapse, but a life built on dignity is unshakable. If you believe that respect is a two-way street and that boundaries are necessary for true love, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments below, if you were in my shoes, would you have opened the gate when she came back crying, or would you have kept it locked? I read every single comment. See you in the next story.